On this Super review, let's take a look at the Super 73 Z1. First things first, full disclosure, this is not going to be a review of a pair of headphones or some other audio equipment like I typically do. If you've been following this channel for a while, you might remember that I used to review some other things, including like a seat for my motorcycle, or I reviewed a Pilot Metropolitan fountain pen. I like to review other things besides audio, and today I want to review the Super 73 Z1, which I've got a picture of it sitting here in my garage right now because I haven't opened it up yet, and I'm interested to dig in. So the Super 73 Z1 is an e-bike, an electric bike. It's a bike with a battery. It's also got pedals, but it's got a battery in it, and it looks like it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's still sitting here in a box in my garage and I gotta open it up, but I'm pretty excited about this. So from what I know about the Z1, it's not the highest spec e-bike out there on the market, but it is one of the cheapest e-bikes out there. The MSRP is around $1,400. As well, it's just one of the coolest looking e-bikes. Does that matter? I don't know. For me, the way that I want to use this thing, I'm not looking for something to commute to and from work on. I've got a motorcycle for that. I live a little bit far from my office to really realistically be able to e-bike to work. It would take me about an hour each way, which I don't want to do. But I do live in a pretty cool area that's, you know, it's got some restaurants and stuff that are a little bit outside of walking distance, and it would be fun to have an e-bike for that. But I've also just got some like dirt areas that I think would be pretty fun to hoon around on. And so that's what I'm really excited to see if the Super 73 can do for me. That was way too many rhyming words. Let's go ahead and open up the box. We'll see what we get inside. And actually, just full disclosure, I don't know that this unboxing video is gonna work out, but my hope is that you can watch me unbox it and assemble the Super 73 Z1 in fast motion, because you don't got that kind of time. But yeah, I'm gonna unbox it, assemble it, spend some time writing this thing, and I'll come back and I'll let you know what do I think about it. All right, I guess it's about time I reviewed the Super 73 Z1. I opened it up, I got it back in August, and it is now middle of February, so it's been a few months since I got it. I should let you know what I think, and part of the reason that it's been a while is that, look, I'm just not like a daily driver on this thing. I'm not using the Super 73 Z1 as a commuter tool. For me, it's a thing for putting around town, for doing errands, for, you know, picking up some food or going to the grocery store, going to the post office, stuff like that. And for me, it's been pretty good for that. I just haven't spent like hundreds of miles a week riding this thing, so it's taken me a while to come to a conclusion. And I don't have it here in the studio with me, so I'll just hold up a picture of it so you can enjoy. And it's very small, so I'll make sure I also give you some B-roll to look at. But I don't know, let's actually just start with how this thing looks, because I think that the design and the aesthetic of the Super 73 is definitely a big part of the appeal of this bike. And I gotta say, in person, just owning this thing and riding it out in public, The design and the aesthetic, it totally lives up to everything that I hoped. I think it is a really, really nice looking bicycle. I think that the color, the build, the construction, the lines, and the simplicity of it are really just quite spot on in a way that most other e-bikes really don't approach. Look, there are some other e-bikes that kind of go for a similar aesthetic to what Super 73 does, but I don't think any of them do it quite as well. In fact, I don't think any of them do it nearly as well as Super 73 does. And that might seem a little bit superficial if you're looking for a really serious e-bike, but given my use case, I hope it's clear, like I wasn't looking for the most serious e-bike. I was just looking for something that would be fun to put around town on, and having it look good actually does kind of matter to me. So I like the way it looks, and I think one thing that actually contributes to how good it looks is just how simple and clean it is, including like just how few cables there are. Look, on a lot of other e-bikes, you can just kind of see a lot of cabling, especially if it's an e-bike that's got gears. It's got, you know, the ability to switch gears and stuff, and the Super 73 doesn't, which could definitely be a downside, right? You've only got one gear to work with, but it means that at least aesthetically, it's just nice and clean and simple looking. I've definitely never had as much attention out in public riding a bike as I have with the Super 73 Z1. And I think part of that's because people recognize it, maybe from Casey Neistat videos. But I also just think that even people that don't recognize it, they just see this grown-ass man riding on this little itty bitty bike. And it's kind of like a lowrider seating position. It just looks fun and friendly and approachable in a way that most bikes don't, and definitely most e-bikes don't. And for me, that actually really was a pretty big consideration, because I wanted an e-bike and I want to ride it on like bicycle trails where I'm sharing space with, you know, pedestrians on foot and other bicyclists. And I didn't want to feel like I was intruding. Like I didn't want to feel like, I don't know, people were looking at me on my e-bike like I shouldn't be there. I know that e-bikes actually, at least, especially, you know, this class 2, if you want to get technical about it, they're perfectly legal on California sidewalks, or at least California, they're legal everywhere a bicycle is. But I still think that a lot of people are just kind of going to intuitively have opinions about e-bikes that look a little bit more motorcycle-y. This one, I thought actually straddles that line just perfectly, and I didn't feel self-conscious at all about riding this thing in public. If I had any complaints about the design of this, the aesthetic of it, I just think that Super 73, I think they could use a little bit more chill on the branding. There are so many damn logos on this thing. It's a bit much. So you've got branding on the seat. You've got, I think, 3 different places where the Super 73 brand appears on the forks, right? You've got it like taped on the forks. You've got it on the triple clamp. It's just a lot of branding. Let's see, where else have you got it? You've got branding down here on the frame. You've got like a stamped brand on the left side of the frame where it mounts to the rear wheel. It's just a lot. And I don't know, I think if it was just a couple of logos, it would be plenty of logos. But the way that I counted it, actually, let's see, how many logos did I count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 logos. Nope, 9 logos if you count both the front and the rear separately. So 9 different logos appear on this thing, and they don't actually really stand out. Like it doesn't look like a NASCAR car. It's just when you start looking at it in detail, it kind of, at least for me, starts to stand out that they've just gone a little bit overboard on the branding. Super 73, you guys don't need to do that. Now, as far as living with the Super 73 Z1, sort of a daily basis, some things that maybe you should know about, you know, I would say that from the start, the unboxing and the assembly process was actually very, very simple. I know a lot of other e-bikes, they recommend you take them to an e-bike shop to have them built, and that sounded like a pain in the butt, and I didn't do that here with the Z1, and it was fine. I think all you really do is you tighten the handlebars, and then you screw on the pedals, and then you're done. You plug it into charge, you're done. And that was pretty important for me, that it was nice and simple. But you do that once and you're done with it. So more day-to-day, what can I say about it? Again, I mentioned it's a very small bike, and that it kind of, you know, plays into the aesthetic appeal of this bike, but I do also think that it can limit your comfort pedaling on this bike. So for me, I'm about 5'10", 180 pounds, fairly medium-sized American dude. And for me, it's fairly comfortable, but it's comfortable if I'm not pedaling it. If I'm, you know, was to treat this as like a very serious bicycle that I wanted to pedal, I would find it a little bit cramped. Just my knees are up a little bit high, and I don't know. There's other things that contribute to it not being the best pedaling bike, but part of it is that small seating position. I mostly found it pretty comfortable, again, for me, mostly using it on electric throttle. So for me, not a big deal. I found the seat, you know, I've seen some complaints about the seat. I actually found the seat to be plenty comfortable, but again, like, I'm not doing really long commutes. Maybe if you're riding this thing for 10 miles at a time, maybe it starts to become a problem. But for me, you know, I was doing like 5 up to 10 miles at a time. I didn't really have any issues with the seat, so I don't really have any complaints there. In fact, I went for a bike ride with my wife, and we switched off between the Super 73 and just a typical mountain bike. And the one reason that she was actually most eager to get into the Super 73 is that she found the seat much more comfortable than your typical mountain bike saddle. Oh, what else can we say about living with this sort of day to day? I would say the charge times, they seemed okay. Like, I didn't really have any issues with the charging time. I would just, every time I would get it home, I would plug it in and charge it, and I wouldn't, you know, ride it more than what, 15 or 20 miles a day that they say the battery range is. So battery life for me was never an issue. You just do have to have it close to a wall outlet. And if you're moving this thing indoors and outdoors of like an apartment building, or you need to go upstairs, or even if you're commuting with this thing on like a bus or something like that, something you should consider is that this is very heavy for a bicycle. For an e-bike, it's not that heavy. In fact, compared to most other bikes like this, the Z1 is actually light-ish. It weighs around 56 pounds according to Super 73. And some other e-bikes will weigh, you know, upwards of like 80 pounds. So 56 pounds, that's actually fairly lightweight until you compare it to your average mountain bike, which weighs about half this. So that's definitely something to consider if you're gonna have to be moving this thing around by hand. Again, if you're putting it on a bus rack or something, or you're carrying it upstairs, moving it through an elevator, 56 pounds, it's not super light. And then when it comes to riding the Super 73 Z1, I talked a little bit about comfort, but what about power? Performance? It's pretty decent, I guess. But again, this is like not the most serious e-bike. If you're looking for something that's gonna be like a super commuter and you need a lot of power and a lot of off the line power, I don't think the Z1 is gonna be the best choice, but I don't think it's bad actually. So let's just say like torque, right, from the electric motor it's not the torquiest. If you're starting from a stop, unless you're fine with a really slow acceleration, you're gonna want to assist the electric motor by pedaling. So basically every time I'm taking off from a start, I wanna get going quickly, I'm pedaling and hitting the electric throttle at the same time. You can take off from a start without pedaling, of course, if you want to, but I think you're gonna be a little bit disappointed with the acceleration here. The other part where you're gonna definitely wanna pedal is when you start going up hills and stuff like that, where the torque on this thing and the power does start to give out, especially if it's a steep hill. You're gonna start losing speed fairly quickly. And if you don't wanna lose speed, you're gonna have to pedal. The good thing is that I never had to pedal on this thing nearly as hard as you would have to pedal a normal bicycle. And that's, you know, even comparing to a bicycle that's got gears and I can downshift into a really low gear, it's never like that. In fact, you know, riding this thing around town, even though I'm having to pedal occasionally for, you know, getting off a stop or going up hills, I'm never ever getting sweaty. And for me, that is a big deal. I think the top speed on this thing is not especially fast. It's around 20 miles an hour, but it can feel fast in certain contexts. So if you're riding like if you're riding on the road alongside cars, 20 miles an hour does not feel very fast, and you're gonna wish you had a little bit more power, but that's kind of where the limit is, at least in terms of legality of these Class 2 e-bikes. So there's that limitation, but if you're riding on a bike path with other bikes or even sharing space with pedestrians, 20 miles an hour actually feels really fast. In fact, it can feel too fast. There were a couple of times where I found myself, slowing down with the brakes and realizing that I should have been slowing down much earlier because I was going so quickly on this bike. So I don't know, the 20 miles an hour limit I think is actually a pretty good spot for something like this, but I also wouldn't mind if it was a little bit torquier and a little bit more powerful up top. Other performance things worth talking about, let's say, there's no suspension on the Z1, which does limit, I think, its off-road capabilities. I mean, the tires that it comes with also limit its off-road capabilities. They're these big, wide, chunky tires, but they are completely slick and they don't have the best traction in the dirt. That said, it didn't prevent me from having a little bit of fun in the dirt, but I definitely would caution riding these things off-road in very extreme conditions, because there are definitely a number of times, especially if I get on the front brakes, where it will wash out very, very easily. The other big issue with the off-road ability, again, I already talked about it a little bit, is the lack of suspension. It just means that you're going over bumps. This thing's pretty crashy. You'll hear the chain just slapping against the chain guard. And it's not the happiest there, but it can get by. But mostly this really is just a road or a pavement cruiser, in my opinion. The brake performance I actually found was plenty satisfactory. I know I've seen some people online complaining about, or not complaining about, just pointing out that the brakes here are fairly simple. They're, a disc-based brake system, which I've never actually had on a bicycle. So for me, I thought these were actually pretty well done brakes. Maybe one complaint I had about the brakes is just that they're kind of noisy. And in fact, after even like 6 months of riding this thing, they're still kind of noisy, which I find a little bit disappointing, but I can live with it. So out of 5 stars, I'll give the Super 73 Z1 very solid 4 stars. I think, again, look, this is not the most serious e-bike out there. If you're looking for a serious commuter e-bike, there's probably better options that have, maybe a little bit of suspension, which is useful on the roads, maybe a little bit better pick up and go from a stop, and probably a little bit better mileage. But I don't know if you can get all that at this price. Really, what the Super 73 Z1 excels at, in my opinion, is just being a really good cruiser around town, putting around, doing chores. I'm not in a hurry to get anywhere on the Super 73. I'm just enjoying it for what it is. And while I gotta pedal sometimes, I'm never breaking a sweat. And for me, that means that it's a thing that I can get around town on a bicycle to places that I wouldn't normally, because I don't wanna get sweaty when I get to my destination. So for me, I quite like it. It's just a lot of fun. And frankly, it makes everyone around me smile, and I enjoy that. If you're interested in checking out this Super 73 Z1, of course, I've got links in the description. And while you're down there, you can hit the like button for the video if you liked it. You can subscribe to the channel, and then I'll see you on the next Super review.